Welcome to Better Swimmer Part 1, Accept the Process. A year ago, I was in a situation where the waters were choppy. The waves were high, the wind was rolling. It was kind of exhausting. And I remember praying, God, I would love to have some calmer waters. And as you may have experienced the still small voice, me hearing back, how about I make you a better swimmer? So I'm going to walk you through in this series is the parts and pieces that come together to make up the whole, so that you can learn how, in the midst of choppy waters that you may have not sought out, or maybe because you ambitiously are trying something, you just find yourself in choppy waters. Either way, how can you not wait for the circumstance to change, but experience your own transformation? How can you become a better swimmer in those choppy waters? This is the nature of transformation. This is the nature for me of what I'm passionate about, obsessed with, how leaders grow and develop. And it is so often through choppy waters. And what's happening for a lot of people is they confuse what it means to be confident in a mindset and confident in a circumstance. Now, if you're a leader of any caliber, of course you want to affect change. You want to see circumstances change and develop. I mean, after all, I was going after an ambitious vision. I was trying to see a circumstance materialize, and it did. But the pathway to get there was choppy waters, and the choppy waters grew something and developed something in me, as they have many, many times. The shift occurs when we understand the process that we're accepting is not the process of learning just how to be forced confidence in circumstances that we so often confuse with faith, but instead a true confidence in who we're becoming. Now, I like beginning to illustrate this with you from 1 Samuel 22. David has been anointed to be king. So this is God's call on his life. He's going to be the next king. And what he doesn't fully realize is this process is playing out is he's in some choppy waters. Saul has gotten mad at him. His life is threatened. He's got to spend all this time hiding out in caves. It's the limbo moment in between a vision that could be and should be true versus what is really happening. And what's happening for us in those choppy water moments, those limbo moments so often, is we're caught between what could be and what is. It's a struggle. And so 1 Samuel 22 actually records that David drops his parents off at the king of Moab's house and says this, "Would you watch them until I'm sure what the Lord will do for me?" You notice that? He's not certain how this is going to go. He's not certain that he's going to become king. He's not certain in the circumstance, even though all this has been revealed to him. So I like sharing this story first because we think that it is wrong if we have doubts. As we are in the choppy waters, we falsely believe that if we have doubts, there's something wrong with us. We need to believe harder. We need to pray harder. We need to try harder. And I want you to know that that is not true. I'm going to walk you through just 3 principles here to accept the process of what's happening when you're in choppy waters becoming a better swimmer. The first part of the process is this. You will go through, and I'm confident of this, circumstances that will cause you doubts. You will go through circumstances that will cause you doubts. Just like what happened to David. I mean, this is what's happened in my life many times. It's like it's cheesy and cliche, but right before the light breaks, the dawn breaks, it's so dark. And I'm like, do I know what I'm doing? Do I have what it takes? Have I led people astray? Have I made the right decisions? Have I figured this out? Have I not? What if this goes? All of that is so normal. Now, when I'm having a conversation like this with somebody, or when I'm teaching this and there's a Q&A, very often somebody's asking about, well, what about James 1? Because James 1 teaches this idea that you must consider it all joy or pure joy when you're going through a circumstance that tests you, choppy waters, that causes you to doubt. And I want to pause here first at this idea of joy, the way that the Greek records it. This is something you're going to hear me reference a lot. Ancient language did not have any abstract concepts that were separated from hard and fixed realities in nature. So we tend to think and talk very conceptually in today's world. That used to not happen. So the etymology of so many words is rooted in concepts in nature. And the idea of this expression or experience of a complete and pure joy was about a deep connected reality. Like you are whole. You can think about the Jewish concept, shalom, wholeness. You could think about what it meant to be forgiven and restored. It wasn't just forgiven of actions in the New Testament, but a restoration to the community. Go show yourself to the priest. You're clean now. You can go back to your people. You can go back to your family. You can be a part of that whole again. What's happening for us when we are in choppy waters is something is developing in us so that we are connected to God, connected to who we are, connected to clarity in what we do, connected into how we grow and build our community. And that is the process we're going to go through over and over and over again. It's the process we're going to go through in this series. This is exactly what happened to Jesus when he was led into the wilderness. I think we skip over this a lot, that the scripture records the Spirit led Jesus into the wilderness. So the enemy tempts Jesus in the wilderness, but the Spirit leads him to the wilderness. You are in some choppy waters right now that might be of your own making. It might be that you were led there. Sometimes I talk to people that are attempting a great vision or some ambition, and they're trying to do something, and they feel bad because they're in choppy waters, like I did something wrong. No, you might have been led into that wilderness by desire, by the ambition, by the goal, by the vision. It might also be that there were some things that you did that self-sabotage. We're going to cover all that in this series. But Jesus was led by the Spirit in the wilderness. And we see this in James, and we see this in the account of Jesus in the wilderness, that the enemy is who tempts. It's not God who tempts us, but God might lead us into the choppy waters. Now, you're going to have to work this out for your own. As I walk you through this series, I'm going to say to you directly, for me, God is not the cause of harm or suffering or evil. And what's happening so oftentimes in choppy waters is we're confusing what's happening in the circumstance with what's happening from the enemy. All I know is this, what Scripture records, and that's what I go back to, that the enemy tempts Jesus in the wilderness. And what are those temptations? These are the doubts, right? Now here's the thing, and I want you to pause here. When we talk about this idea of complete joy, what's happening in a testing is it's finishing its work so that you can know who you are, you can know why you're here, and you can know where you're headed. That's what happens to Jesus in the wilderness. But a lot of times what happens when people say, well, isn't doubt wrong? Because James 1 says, if you ask God, God will give you wisdom, and if you doubt, you're like an unstable person. Well, the problem is I've doubted before. Am I an unstable person? Jesus is wrestling in the wilderness. These are real temptations for him. We're going to do a session on the temptations in the next series in a deeper way. But like he's struggling with these. He wants the way out. He wants the glory. He has a big appetite, a big desire, and he's wrestling with that, and he has doubts. And in the doubts, he still takes the action of faith. That's exactly what James is teaching. James is teaching that choppy waters have to finish their work in us so that we arrive on the other side with pure joy. We can get excited about the process that's happening, a completeness, a wholeness. And we ask God for what to do, James 1, and God gives us the wise action to take. Because God gives us the wise action to take, the nuance is this. I might have doubts in my mind, but I don't want to have doubts in my action. And the hard part of what's happening in the process of how we're transformed in the becoming of a better swimmer is I am confident that you will go through circumstances that will cause you doubts. The second reality I'm confident of is that those doubts will get worse. It's like this is getting turned up. And in it getting turned up, the doubts are there, you struggle. And as you struggle, you start to think you're doing something wrong or there's something wrong with you. I mean, Jesus is in the wilderness for 40 days. And there's a symbology there to that. Sometimes the moments that we're in choppy waters are way longer than we would have wanted. Way, way longer. We're going to cover that in one of the teachings in this series. But here's how I know somebody doesn't understand the process of being a better swimmer in choppy waters, is that they run past their doubts. They become very zealous, very forced, very much full of hype. They're afraid to acknowledge their doubts. And the dangerous part of that, and the dangerous interpretation that people take from James 1 that's so false, is the doubts are right where God is rooting out the mindset rot in you. That's right where God is transforming you. I'm confident that your doubts are going to show up in choppy waters. I'm confident those doubts are going to get worse. And you're not wrong to have those doubts. The wrong action to take, or I should say, the wrong place we land with this is when we aren't committed in our actions. That's exactly what James 1 was talking about. James 1 was talking about when you ask God for wisdom and God gives you the direction to take and you don't commit to that action. Now, there's grace here. Man, I've messed up and not committed to the action. We're going to cover that in future series. There's always grace. But this is the standard for how we become. The situation, the circumstances cause doubt. The doubts get worse. And if in the doubts we can hear them and we can be still and we can notice them and we can not rush past them and we can feel our weakness, like 2 Corinthians 13:4, for to be sure he was crucified in weakness, yet he lives by God's power. Likewise, we are weak in him, yet we will live with God's power to serve you. If we can feel that weakness, in that moment, we're gonna find the wise action to take. And that's the third reality that I'm confident of in the process of becoming. God will show you the wise action to take. James 4 talks about this idea that as business leaders, we say, we're going to go to this city and do business this year. We're going to go to this city and do business next year. He says, you don't know that. If that's God's will. What you want to be locked into is not trying to predict the future, not trying to control the choppy waters. And it's fine to plan, and it's fine to affect change in your moment. But what you want to be locked into is that quiet within, that still small voice in the choppy waters. You accept the process that you are becoming the kind of person who in your doubts, the mindset rot is getting purified or rooted out. And you take those doubts and you say, what action do I need to take? I'm confident that if you get still and you get quiet, you will hear that action that you need to take. I want to close with this from Scripture because I think it's such a great way to illustrate this idea. John the Baptist. Jesus is on the scene. Behold the Lamb of the world. I mean, he's all in. You talk about not belief, just empty words, faith, real action. I don't care so much about what you believe. I care more about what your faith is, the action you take. He's got faith. Fast forward a little bit. He's confronted Herod. Herod gets mad, puts him in prison. And then John goes through what we would all go through, doubt. So I'm confident that circumstances will arise that will make you feel doubt. That's what happened to John the Baptist. Then his doubts got worse. Why? Because he's in prison. This looks bad for him. And he sends his disciples to ask Jesus' disciples, to ask, are you the one? To ask Jesus, are you the one? Here's what's so powerful about the story and what so many people miss. John the Baptist is at the height of faith. This is the one. Then he hits the bottom of faith. Are you the one? And you see in the narrative, like, Jesus is actually traveling away from John the Baptist. It looks terrible. He's not going to rescue his friend. He doesn't rescue him from the choppy waters. And John the Baptist goes through a choppy water circumstance that's terrible and becomes a better swimmer in a way that we'll only know on the other side of all things. But here's what Jesus says about John the Baptist. No one has been born greater. Go research it. Go study it. No one has been born greater. In the midst of the choppy waters, he had doubts, and the doubts got worse. But he kept taking the wise action the best he could, even in his doubts. Commit. Find the action. Take it. The process of what you're going through right now is to be accepted. You cooperate with it or you fight against it. You're becoming a better swimmer in these choppy waters. And you're going to learn to feel those doubts and not fight against them. I wish I could follow you around for a day and just draw your attention to the moments you feel weak so that you wouldn't rush past, so that you wouldn't zealously try to convince yourself of something, but that you would feel, see, and hear that doubt. And in the doubt, you would ask for the one wise action to take. Become a better swimmer in the midst of choppy waters. Peace.